Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the Major Motion podcast, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Negroni, film editor for InBetweenDrafts.com, and from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's a freelance film writer, and if anything, he's always challenging me. It's Will Ashton.
All right. Finally, we're talking about the movie of the spring, arguably.
Of the spring, Challengers, which came out a while ago already. It was supposed to come out in September, wasn't it?
Yes, so it was delayed on its own account due to the actor strike, because, this is a fairly star-driven film in the sense that, I think a movie like this cannot count on something like IP unless you consider the sport of tennis to be IP, I suppose.
I do, yeah.
And I would say, if anything, if they made a pickleball movie these days, I think you could sell it on the IP star power of pickleball, because that's something that I notice when I go to California, like something that I see or do in California, like I don't know if it's just my blinders open or like I just kind of get a brief glimpse into the future, because I know last time I went for your wedding, I was like, there are a lot of Teslas in California. And then little did I know, only a few months later, I'd just see tons of Teslas, out and about. And then when we went this time, you were like, oh, pickleball's the thing. You got to do it. It's, it's so cool. And we did everywhere. It was fun. But now it's like becoming a nationwide thing. It's like, a sport that was invented in the 60s, right?
Yeah. It started in the 60s. It's kind of in Seattle. As like a kind of backyard game. And it blew up during a pandemic and has been growing super fast ever since. Yeah. Because people wanted to do something outside, they wanted to do something kind of fun. And there were still people who were hesitant about indoor activities at the time.
The ironic thing is that like pickleball is kind of more like a closer or tighter knit version of tennis. Like it's a smaller court. There's kind of more like direct interaction as opposed to tennis when you're like opposite sides of the court. I would think tennis would be more popular than pickleball during the pandemic, but
and it's important we bring this up. It is very crucial to the movie Challengers because I'm a former tennis player. I played tennis in college, high school, and the thing with tennis is that it's very difficult to find people to play with. Ever since I moved to California back in 2014, I found myself like I wasn't part of any like tennis communities. There weren't really people willing to play because like skill level is such a thing. And you have to pay to go to these like special courts. And it's just like hard to find people to play with. The advantage that pickleball has had over the last few years is that you can show up. And, like when I was teaching you how to play, like you remember, right? Like people were just like coming and going, you can go by yourself, you can go with a partner, and people are like rotating in and out. It's because it's more casual. And, don't get me wrong, it's a game with like a skill level requirement. Like, there are people who are really good and you can get a great workout out of it. But compared to tennis, it's something that like more ages can get a lot of enjoyment out of without, I think the stress of playing tennis. It's a very different thing. And it takes up a lot less space, as you said. So you can have way more people playing and there can be less waiting. And so, yeah, it's honestly more addicting. Way more addicting.
So that raises a couple questions I have, all related to Challengers. I should stress. I'm not going off topic. For one, do you think that is maybe part of the reason why this movie is a period piece? Obviously, there are flashback scenes that take place in the past, but the movie proper also is a period piece in the sense that it takes place in like 2019 in an effort to
anything to do at all with pickleball. I think. Well,
no, I know I'm joking. My tongue is firmly on cheek here. I know it's because of the pandemic, but I like the theory of yours where, the pandemic happens in 2020, and then that's the rise of pickleball. I like the idea of Luca Guadagnino being like, it has to be 2019 or else pickleball movie. And
there's a little bit of a kernel of, insight that I think you're accidentally tapping into. And I wish that we had our good friend Julia Tatey on the show because she's a fellow tennis fan as I am. But I would say that like tennis is nowhere near as popular as it used to be it's been kind of relegated to like, it doesn't have that same superstar status that it once did. And there are plenty of reasons for that. I think that, for example, like we still get things like King Richard, right? And
Sure.
but I don't know, these days, like the big tennis players just aren't as like there were more celebrity tennis players like 10, 15 years ago. And that is a big thing with this movie. I don't think this movie is as believable if it takes place in like 2022, 2023, honestly.
Probably. Though, I mean, I feel like the sport generally picks of interest if there's like a superstar in it. You know, like in the 2000s, I think the reason why tennis kind of became more popular, again, much like golf with Tiger Woods, was the Williams sisters. Like
the Williams sisters, John McEnroe was, well, that's a little bit before this.
That was before, but I mean, sisters, but I think it kind of like that was the 80s, right? Like McEnroe was the 80s.
Yeah, when he went up against Bjork. And so, like I think like in the 2000s, you have like Federer.
Did you call him Bjork, like the musician?
Bjork. Did I say Bjork? Yeah, Bjork, right?
Isn't it like Borg? Or
yeah, it's something like that. I'm not as familiar with the 80s tennis, but definitely more so with tennis from like Battle of the Sexes, because then you have Billie Jean around that time. And so, I think like 2000s, like that's like when I was playing tennis in like school and stuff. And like people knew like the big players around that time for sure. But it definitely, I feel like it's waned quite a bit like since then. And I don't know if that's just my impression because in the 2010s I stopped playing, but yeah, I that was my impression, because like it used to be that you could watch like tennis like all the time on like ESPN and stuff, and now it's like unless it's like a Grand Slam or something, like there's hardly any coverage anymore, and it's kind of sad if you're a big fan of tennis. And that's a big reason why tennis players are kind of hating pickleball right now, because they're very there's a lot of territorial strife happening. I think I talked to you about this a little bit too, didn't I?
Sure, yeah, I think so.
In passing, yeah, there's a bit of a rivalry there. Not always the healthiest rivalry. Sometimes they, both sides are like, vandalizing each other's courts, and it can get sticky.
That's a little
like if you go on like Instagram and stuff, I see both like tennis and pickleball stuff from my algorithm because I'm John Negroni, and I like every single pickleball video without fail is going to have tennis players in there just like trolling, and they're just going to be like, "Why don't you just play tennis? Like, aren't you good enough?"
Sure, yeah.
It's like, dang.
I guess that's something they can say for challengers too. Still challenging after all these years. That's the sequel territory. But I will ask, and this is kind of an open-ended question. I know you can't really have the answer for this, but like, do you think this movie will increase interest in tennis again in this age of pickleball that we have? Because it seems like, now that we are reviewing this movie a little bit late, it's like on VOD now as of I think last week.
Still playing in theaters. I saw it in a theater a few days ago.
What I'm saying is like we can kind of assess the reaction or like the social media kind of reaction to the film. And I can't speak for your feeds on Blue Sky or whatever you're on now, but I will say like on Facebook and Twitter and on various social medias, there is a sort of like fun playfulness with kind of this movie and the response to it. Like this idea of like, siding with different people, like kind of doing the Lydia Tarr thing where people are like pretending that these characters are real people and like kind of like adding different like fan fiction sort of scenarios to it. There's a lot of like,
well, I think like Zendaya literally had to do some damage control a bit of like, hey, like my character is supposed to be unlikable. Like, like I think she had to be a little bit like, hey, sometimes movies are just about bad people and that's part of the deal. And so sometimes I think she's speaking a little bit to her younger audience. In the sense that sometimes like people kind of look at media, like we've talked about this all the time with things like Licorice Pizza, right? Sometimes people, or Red Rocket, like they look at a movie and like a bad person is the main character, and they're like, that means the movie is saying these bad things are good, and that is definitely not inherently the case. I mean, it can be, but not necessarily. So, yeah, to what you're saying though, I think your earlier question about like, is this going to make tennis I got it. Honestly, I haven't felt like the urge. Like I was watching the movie and afterward I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go play some pickleball. Close enough. And that's what I did. I had no interest to actually like go back to tennis, honestly. Yeah.
So you just think
it costs too much money.
Ironically will spike more interest in pickleball is what you're saying.
And honestly, when I went to Letterboxd and I started taking like a little bit of a peek at what my friends were like logging in the reviews. I think I literally saw somebody reference pickleball there. They said that they'll never play pickleball the same way again. So I don't know about that. I think that it's so like such a blip in the grand scheme of things, this movie. And it's interesting that we get to talk about it so long after it came out. And so we're kind of past the hype cycle, because you mentioned like Blue Sky and all that stuff. I'm not really on social media anymore. I'm on Instagram for sure, and I go on Reddit, but like I got to the point where I open up Blue Sky or Threads or whatever, and it's just like the endless negativity is just like getting to me. And so I've kind of just moved away from that stuff in general, and now I'm just getting the negativity on Reddit. So there's at least it's more self-selecting. And Discord.
I thought you were gonna say you get that now in real life instead of online. That negativity. But
thancfully not too much in real life.
But yeah, I definitely know you're on Instagram. But okay, not to delay things any further.
All I do is like send you stuff on Instagram. There's no doubt there.
Right. But yeah, I guess we've kind of delayed it enough. We can talk a little bit about the plot of the film and general thoughts and whatnot. I don't mean to stick to just pickleball here.
I wonder, it felt a little bit like you're like, I don't even want to talk about the movie. I just want to catch up with John. How's he doing? And talk about pickleball. Maybe you're getting that call to the court.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll meet you there. Yeah. So this, as we kind of mentioned already, this came out toward the end of April. It did premiere in like late March, I think, in Australia. But this is an Amazon/MGM movie. So yeah, it did its rounds. It's made 78 million so far, which sounds good for a movie like this, right? Like a movie that's kind of like really only 3 actors really in the movie who are like have any kind of like recognition. Like, so Zendaya, Josh O'Connor, and Mike Faist are the movie. Like, there are other characters, but like nobody else has like any kind of character to them. They're just kind of like part of the movie in like some small way. But in this movie, it really is like 3 people, kind of a small scale movie, but it still costs like $55 million reportedly to make this movie, which is kind of fascinating. We mentioned Luca Guadagnino, of course, is the director of this movie, probably most famous for Call Me By Your Name. That was his big Oscar movie. He's obviously done plenty of other things. I think that you were a big fan of Suspiria, the remake of it that he did. And he did a couple of things since then. I didn't see We Are Who We Are, that miniseries, but I remember Bones and All, 2022. That was okay. The Timothée Chalamet thing with Taylor Russell. And
I thought that was good. I didn't think it was good, best, but I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of, it was all right. I think that, honestly, Challengers is a movie I've been kind of waiting for from this guy, just because it's definitely got a little bit more of that pop, a little bit more of that like attitude that I kind of want from a movie these days.
It's got that kind of, for lack of a better word, splashiness that was in A Bigger Splash, like just before Call Me By Your Name, like that kind of mischievousness, that kind of, like we said, kind of cheeky playfulness, like this idea of like leaning into maybe the melodrama of it a little bit more and kind of the heightened stakes, not only stylistically, but like in terms of the dramatic character development and whatnot. Yeah, it just kind of seems like, and it's like a little bit more of a darkly comedic kind of film than his more recent serious films that he's done.
Which I think is what people... Go ahead.
No, I think that's what people are really responding to. Like, I think they weren't expecting maybe that from, like you said, like if they're kind of, their first point of reference is Call Me By Your Name, followed by the 2 other films that we mentioned. I could see them being kind of taken aback in a good way by how much this movie kind of leans into the camp or the melodrama of it all in a fun way.
Yeah, because I do want to point out that this is Justin Kuritzkis is the screenwriter here, and he's a playwright. This is his first screenplay, and he happens to be married to Celine Song, the director of Past Lives. So definitely like a big kind of thing for this guy coming out, especially because he does have something else coming out with Luca Guadagnino. I'm not sure if it's going to be next year, but
I think it's this year. Queer, yeah, the William S. Burroughs adaptation with Daniel Craig.
Yeah. And then one of the novel from the 80s. But yeah, so he has that coming. I think he has like one other project that's going to be coming. So there are a lot of eyeballs on this guy, especially because Challengers has been well reviewed. People are liking the movie. It made some money. Now, it didn't make a ton of money in the grand scheme of things, just in terms of like the budget. I'm not sure what the deal is with the budget there, honestly, because I don't know. It feels like more like, I don't know, like 18-20 million dollar budget. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but
I was gonna say like 30 to 40 for me. Like it just seems like it's like 10 million more than I expected.
Fair enough. Kind of a longer movie, a little over 2 hours. And yeah, again, I think even though I'm not on social media, like this movie definitely kind of like broke through the noise a bit. I definitely was seeing a lot of chatter about it. I was definitely noticing a lot of people were really excited that it was finally coming out after getting delayed because of the writer's strike. And yeah, it does have the benefit of the Zendaya star power, who's definitely one of the more interesting actors working at the moment. Mike Faced, who is kind of coming off of a little bit of like after West Side Story, he was kind of like the big, like, wow, like this guy really has it, right? Like what was he going to do next? He was kind of known for, his Broadway stuff. And this is kind of the probably the first major thing that we've seen him in since that West Side Story came out. So he's definitely another like kind of young dude who I want to say he's like in his mid-20s maybe, who maybe has some big stuff coming. And then Josh O'Connor, who kind of this guy's like come out of nowhere just because like he's been around. Like he was in Peaky Blinders. I think he was in Doctor Who as well, but he's been kind of like a, kind of a guy in the background a little bit. But between this and some other stuff, like he is kind of like showing up at the moment.
He was kind of more in the same camp, I think, as like Paul Mescal. Like he was in some like notable art house kind of films. Like, well, that too, I guess. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with his TV work, so maybe I'm speaking a little out of turn. But I feel like he was in that movie. I think it came out in 2016. I never got around to seeing it, but God's Own Country. That was like a real big indie darling. And then this past year, shortly before Challengers, he had La Chimera. Or Chimera.
La Chimera, I guess.
La Chimera, yeah. Yeah. Which I think was also like a big kind of art house hit. It was a Neon title, and I think people are finding that film now, probably because of kind of the newfound stardom that's coming from this movie. But yeah, I mean, I think he's just kind of been around, but like you say, I think this was his kind of like breakout in some respects, in the way that like kind of feels like
He's had small roles, to be sure. But like, I mean, the guy was also like, he was in Emma. I think that was his last like kind of big movie, the one with Anya Taylor-Joy. But aside from that, like not a lot of movies people have seen. Like not a lot of people saw Mothering Sunday, right? So like smaller stuff for sure. But after watching this movie, I'm kind of like, okay, this guy's getting some phone calls, I think, for some stuff coming up, because he kind of is like a powerhouse in this movie. Also, just want to mention Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross doing the music. And I mean, you can just tell, I didn't know that they were doing the music going into the movie, but as the movie was going, I was like, okay, I have a feeling I know who did this score, because it is just so intense and it's so obviously well done, but also like extra for the almost for the sake of it. And,
I mean,
yeah.
They've done some really good work of late. Like their score for Mank was really good. I think their score for The Killer, Soul, the most recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like all very good scores. But I think this might be their best score since The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I think it's very, very, very good.
I like that opinion. It's an agreeable one. I don't know if I agree myself, but I'm into it. And yeah, because I do remember really liking how they did Bones and All, and how that score turned out. But this one is like just way more memorable. It really sticks with you, as Peggy Olson would say. Okay, so Challengers kind of follows the story of these like young tennis players. There's 3 of them. It's kind of like a love triangle, and that's an oversimplification. But it's also like a bit of a time hop of a movie. We kind of start in 2019, and there's like this big epic tennis match going on. And then we go back in time, and we just like more and more get context around like who these players are and their relationships to one another. So for example, the movie is kind of all over the place. Like there's a moment where we'll go a week back in time, and then the next scene will go 13 years back in time, and then we'll go 5 years back in time. And it's all kind of a patchwork of just showing you what's going on with these 3 people. 2 of them are the male tennis players, and that is the Josh O'Connor character and the Mike Faced character. And they have this kind of like really deep connection, best friends, maybe something a little bit more. And their sexuality is definitely something that's kind of in question. And you also have this like woman in between them, and that's Zendaya, who they kind of like come across when they are in their like kind of high school slash college, sort of like about to turn pro, tennis prodigy school, basically. And I don't want to give too much away, because kind of the fun thing about this movie is that you sort of watch everything develop, and you kind of figure things out in a dramatic irony kind of way before the characters do, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, it's a propulsive movie. As I said before, it really is just following three characters for the most part. There is a lot of tennis. There's more tennis than I even expected, and I expected plenty of tennis. And it's also, it's got some sexuality, to be sure, but it's not dripping in it. It's not a very in your face sensual movie, just in the most explicit sense. But it's way more about like what's underneath, I think, sex.
Plenty of eroticism to it, I think. Maybe not
as
I think explicit.
Yeah.
As you're like, with the exception of maybe one or two scenes, like it's not as explicit as maybe some people would think. But
the movie tells you at the very beginning, right? It's like Zendaya's character is telling you that like a game of tennis itself is a relationship. Mm-hmm. It is like a sexual relationship, and the movie's telling you to view the tennis that way. And you're supposed to be sort of like reading that as like this is how these characters are expressing their passion for each other through this sport.
Yep.
So I guess with that then,
yeah, I know. I didn't know if you were leading me to something or what that was about.
Wow. Let's see. Will Ashton, is this an ace? Is the ball's in your court? Are you going to hit it back?
Did it serve? I really enjoyed this movie. I mean, I'm gonna lean on you a little bit in the sense that it's been about a month since I've seen it, but I saw it in IMAX with a pretty full crowd, and it felt like one of the most rewarding sort of theatrical experiences in that way. Like it was, it was gratifying to just have a like mid-budget adult film like this done with this much style and this much, excitement in a way that felt like, it wasn't pandering or like downplaying to the audience. Like it leans into its quirks and its style in a way that's really fun and not, I think, overbearing. But no, I think it's more than anything. I mean, I don't want to shortchange. Is it Feist? I thought it was Mike Faust.
You're asking the wrong person. I never met the guy, but maybe someday.
I mean, I think he is good. Obviously, I'm not trying to dwindle his performance, but I think really, as you were basically alluding to, it's really just a great showcase for Josh O'Connor and Zendaya. I mean, I think certainly for Josh O'Connor, it feels like one of those announcing sort of performances in the sense of like, here's this guy who's been around just, doing consistent good work, but not on this platform and not for this wide of an audience, I guess. And he really, knocks it out of the park. I think he has the trickiest performance to pull off. And I think he's the one that is probably given the most meat on the bone to play with, but I think this is also a really great showcase for Zendaya, who I've enjoyed. I haven't watched Euphoria, but I've been enjoying her kind of rise in fame. I don't think she has always been, like amazing at everything she does. Like I mentioned, like Dune Part 2, a movie I really did enjoy. I thought she was one of the weaker elements of that movie. I don't think that's to her disadvantage. I just think it was just maybe wasn't a film that was best utilizing her potential. But this movie, not only is it a really compelling multi-layered performance, but it's just a great showcase of her charisma and her, adopting this sort of adult role in a way that showcases a maturity that I've been, I think, longing for her for, the last few years to get out of kind of the cycle of being in like the MCU and whatnot. And yeah, I think it's just a really rewarding experience all around. I think it just shows that Luca Guadagnino can be a director that really flourishes with a little bit more fun behind the chair, and he can really get the right actors to have a ball with it, as it were. And yeah, I think it's just it's a very good time at the movies. It's a good movie to watch with friends where you can kind of like dish and gossip a little bit afterwards. I think that's something that we really need at the movies right now. And I was very happy to experience this kind of film once more.
Yeah, I think we can break open. Oh, I have this little box here. There it is, right in front of me. And I'm going to open the box. I'm going to take, here we go. It's a piece of paper, and it's something we don't get to say. Oh, here we go. They don't make them like this, like they used to. They don't make them like this as much these days, whatever the phrase is. This piece of paper is very all over the place.
Yeah, that was a lot of buildup for a payoff that I don't think was quite there, but I admire the hustle and the swayiness of it.
It really is something though, isn't it? How it's such a simple movie, you know, something that is based on just such a small concept, but it has so much room to kind of build upon itself. And you know, I walked out of this thing feeling great. You know, it's kind of one of those rare movies, I think, where I don't like any of the characters involved. I don't want any of them necessarily to like get what they want. You know, it's one of those things where I want them to get what they need, essentially. And like you kind of said, I find myself really like digging into their psyche, and there are so many like implicit things in the movie that you can dig into in a spoiler way of like, hey, you know, was this kind of in between the lines with this character? Did this character do this because of this? And what do you think they're really feeling? And I think that's especially true for, I think, because you mentioned Josh O'Connor. I mean, he has the trickiest role, and I think you're right, because he has to be this kind of like unlikable yet likable kind of, you know, bad boy, but he's Josh O'Connor. Like he doesn't look like that imposing or intimidating, but that's part of him. Like he also kind of has to be this like unconventionally attractive guy at the same time, like just have that, like, as the kids call it, Riz. But then there is also Mike Feist, whatever his name is. And there's something also kind of like quietly depressing about this guy. At the same time, like you just kind of see him, I don't know, like in this movie, like when he sort of like peaks and you kind of get a sense of like who he really is, like it's invigorating, you know? And you can really understand and buy how this guy kind of like worms his way into like other people's lives. And that's like the basis of a lot of this movie too. And he's kind of like it's easy to underestimate him in this movie a little bit, you know, to kind of look at him as like a little bit of the wet blanket compared to Zendaya and Josh O'Connor. But no, I think that he's actually kind of, he's maybe our Dennis, if we're doing an Always Sunny kind of thing here, if I may. But yeah, I dug this thing so much. I really dug this movie. I have so many nice things to say about it.
I'm glad to hear that. Josh O'Connor's character is absolutely the Dennis of this relationship. There is no question in my mind. He is the Mac of this relationship, and I'm not going to go down into this rabbit hole too much because what you're proposing is sort of an incestuous sort of thing, but nevertheless,
fitting for this movie, to be honest.
I don't know about that, but no, I mean, I think it's, yeah, I mean, it just like we were
the Mike Feist character
before.
Doesn't strike you as like a serial killer, though. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
You're suggesting he has sort of like this Lance Armstrong quality that I just am not really.
There's something kind of just like really dark beneath that. Because I don't know, I think that I get what you're saying, but Josh O'Connor strikes me as Mac. I know this is a weird tunnel we've just, you know, kind of gone into here.
Yeah, you're wrong, I think, on this one, but that's okay. I know you don't watch that much Always Sunny.
I'll have to defer to the authority, huh? Okay, so what else about this movie? So I do think that there are some interesting set pieces here. They do some interesting things that almost took me out, which is like, now we're going to do a perspective of like, you're the tennis ball. Like there are some gimmicky things like that I think could be easy to write off, but I didn't find myself breaking away from it. I didn't find myself getting upset and being like, come on, like lame. If anything, I think that it was just on the line of like, I get what you're going for. It's a bit on the nose, but it is tennis. Like, I think that tennis is just, there are only so many ways to like show it cinematically before it starts to get repetitive, right? You have to kind of mix it up. You kind of have to do different things. There have been so many tennis movies. I love every single one of them, even the bad ones. And if you're going to like make your mark, I kind of get why he wants to do it the way he does. But yeah, I guess overall, I'm happy with how the tennis of it all came about.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are certain sports that have a very inherently sort of cinematic quality to them, like baseball or football or basketball. I don't know if I'd say tennis necessarily is that, but I don't dismiss what you're saying in the sense of like, I think there is, in any good tennis match, this kind of understanding of the emotionality of it, or like the emotional stakes are at play. And if you take a more conventional approach, I don't think you'll really recognize that or kind of play it to the fullest, as it were. I think what Guadagnino is doing is really establishing what's going on in these characters' heads, while not sacrificing the entertainment value at the same time. And I think that's a trickier balance, and I think some people might give it credit. And I'm not going to say that every flourish or technical choice really worked. For instance, there's a scene here that involves two of our characters like in like a windstorm. It almost plays like something out of a soap opera, which given what I'm saying before, I feel like would be a point in its favor, no pun intended. But I feel like for that scene, it took me a little bit out of it. I don't know if you felt that way, but I think those type of moments for me are like few and far between. I think consistently it establishes a heightened tone that's not too jarring or like ever feels like it's too out of place, more often than not, at least. And I think Guadagnino really kind of finds a fun balance here in a way that I hope he kind of brings this playfulness to his films again. Not that I disliked the ones before. Certainly I really enjoy those as well, but I think they've been hammering for that kind of cheekiness that kind of got lost post Call Me by Your Name.
I think I agree with you quite a bit, actually, and especially because it is such a heightened movie, just in general. I really like what Cinema Joe said here. He said there is no sport more intimate or erotic than tennis. It's one of the few major sports where two players agree to partake for hours in a duel of body, mind, and soul. Naturally, to engage with anyone that intensely, an inescapable relationship is forged, one that intensifies with every stroke, every bead of sweat, every grunt. It may not be as flashy as boxing, but arguably the lack of contact is what makes tennis more arousing. I think Cinema Joe is saying that it's edging. It's not the anticipation of intimacy more thrilling than the act itself. So it makes sense that tennis is used as a vehicle to explore. Yeah, well, he's got more. Explore the dynamics of relationships, both romantic and platonic. The constant tension between obsession and desire, sex as a weapon, sex as a tool. Challengers is completely unafraid to explore the sensuality and innate queerness in sports and friendship. Zendaya, Feist, and O'Connor are truly larger than life, and their sweaty chemistry is the much-needed reminder of the imperative role sex plays in storytelling. And then he also goes on to praise the Reznor-Ross score and quite a few other small things. So that's from Cinema Joe, and I think that it's a great overview. I think it really covers kind of the pitch of this movie. But sorry, you were chomping at the bit, I think.
Oh no, I was just saying it before. It was like it's not about the serving; it's about the gooning. Was what I was going to say. But when you helped me off, that kind of delayed the timing of that joke.
I apologize. It's a tough one to kind of to squeeze in there. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, well, for one, I definitely glad he brought up boxing because that's another sport that I think is very, very inherently cinematic as well. Maybe the most inherently cinematic sport, like other than baseball or basketball, I think. But yeah, I think he is on the money there in the sense that I remember, I forget if it was with you or someone else, I was talking about like something I really miss about movies is we don't really get to see like sweat anymore. And I think that's kind of because we don't have film as much anymore. Like in the sense like movies shot in film where you have to have these certain lightings and things are just inherently like sets are just very hot. There's a lot of hot equipment that's kind of going around. And that would translate to like some films where there is a lot of tension and sweat and stuff like that. And I feel like something that's become kind of more sterile about the digital age, it kind of loses that inherent human quality. And I love that this movie not only was shot in film, but you just see so much like sweat and dripping and like oozing throughout this film.
That's one of Guadagnino's strengths, isn't it? I mean, he's a master of the senses. I think that one of the great things about Call Me by Your Name is how it was one of the landmark modern films in making you be able to smell and taste through the screen.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would definitely say I felt that with Bones and all. In the way that it's just like, oof,
gosh,
this movie is ripe.
And I think that in addition to that, like I have absolutely had that experience of like when you play a game of tennis with somebody and there's something on the line, right? Like it's a real competition. There is something like kind of just like psychological, that like a psychological game that you're playing with that person, and you may not even know their name, you may not know anything about them. But when I was playing in high school in tennis and when I was playing in college too, I just absolutely find myself like getting into another person's head, and it was just this like very surreal thing. You really like start to know someone when you duel them, just in general. And tennis is just like one of those vehicles, in a very like seemingly low stakes kind of game, right? But there is a lot to it. It's very intense, and yeah, I really like that observation. And I think it's also pretty telling, right? That like when the movie's like framing that relationship between the Faced character and the O'Connor character, it starts off with them not against each other, but on the same team, in doubles. And that too was just such a like the introduction of their dynamic in that way. There was something like very sensual about it, and you could have so many conversations about the nature of their kind of like relationship and what it really means. I think that like as I was walking out of the theater, I was like, wow, this is just like when Will and I were in that Airbnb in Palm Springs, and then Mike knocked on our door to like walk in, and Will and I had to compete for him. I won't give anything else away.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I was going to just point out that my youngest sister, Emily, plays tennis, and she, she's in Argentina right now, so she doesn't, in general, see a lot of movies, but, especially being abroad. But she made a special point to see this one on opening day because she's a big fan of Zendaya, and she loves tennis.
What'd you think?
She loved it. And I was going to say, she kind of echoed your statements, because one of the messages she sent me on WhatsApp was, the tennis was played out perfectly. It's all a mental game that was demonstrated perfectly. The love interest made it funny and intense film. I always say tennis is a relationship because it begins with love all.
Nice. So, Emily Ashton, everybody. The only comment that matters, especially for this conversation. You heard it here first. Yeah, I have to wonder too, like it definitely comes across like maybe Justin, I don't want to say his name incorrectly, maybe I already have, but Justin Kuritsky's, maybe he's never really played tennis in his life. Maybe he's just watched tennis. I don't know, but it comes across very authentic. I would definitely like to investigate that and just be like, do you just kind of understand this game really well by accident? I don't know.
I want to get these two filmmakers, him and Celine Song, into couples therapy. I think there's just I don't know. Watching their films, I really like them, and I also feel like I've come to a dinner party each time where like I'm basically meeting them, and like they're like kind of having like tensely worded fights in front of me and revealing a lot of baggage, and I'm just kind of sitting there drinking wine, watching the fireworks happen, but also feeling like a little uncomfortable. Like, should I be watching this? Should I be here for this? Should I leave?
Friend of the show, Amanda the Jedi, gave this 4.5 stars, and she said, action movies wish they were this exhilarating. I have to agree. The tension and the edge that like my seat ran out of edge. I was edging, my seat, that is. And because there was like a point in this movie where I had to go to the bathroom and I refused. I was like, I cannot miss a second. And that is just like it for a movie that's 130 minutes, 2 hours and 10 minutes. I mean, that is something, because like I knew I had to go to the bathroom like 20 minutes in. And I couldn't go. I couldn't say no. I could not say no to challengers. The challenge was accepted on my part. Also, this is fun. Sydney wrote, "Hey, we saw you from across the tennis court and really dig your vibe. Do you want to engage in a biblical level throuple over multiple decades?" I really like that.
Sure.
Quite.
What would be the wildest sport to have like a challengers for?
Like
bowling?
Oh yeah, I mean, we already have Alley Cat Strike though. I know you didn't grow up on Disney Channel movies, but yeah. That's one from Matt Serafini, friend of the show. Bowling. What about darts?
Darts, sure. I mean, or bobsledding.
The Ted Lasso dart scene that you never saw.
Sure. I was going to tell you the new Garfield movie. I obviously won't reveal my thoughts too early, but I saw it today, and the Ted Lassoing of Garfield is very much felt in that film. From its casting to its tone to its energy, I am very curious to hear I was interested to hear your thoughts on that, knowing that you were going to see it today, and then you were all like, "Oh, I'm a busy boy with big boy pants on. I did not watch this Garfield movie."
Yeah. But hey, look, I did see Furiosa, and I was kind of hoping that Furiosa would be similar to Garfield in some ways. Furiosa doesn't have like a sport that these characters. I mean, I guess racing. I don't know.
Well, if you talk to Lights Camera Jackson, he says that this weekend is the next Barbenheimer with Garfiosa.
I mean, hey, look, that's the person I always go to for the
Sure.
late breaking news. Lucy said Luca Guadagnino has his finger on the pulse of what the masses currently crave in a film. Zendaya and homoeroticism in that order. Also, instantly my favorite score in a decade. Reznor and Ross have done it again. Yeah, I forgot to mention this before, but I do find this movie to just be really like in tune, at least with my impression of Gen Z in a lot of ways. Because it's a very Gen Z movie, but it's about millennials because the characters, like the actors are Gen Z actors, but the characters are millennials. And so in that sense, it kind of feels like a movie that's like, I know Will's kind of like mimicking me right now because I have my hands behind my head and Will's doing the same thing. He's being all mean and fussy. But all that to say, here, go ahead and mimic me. All that to say, like, it does feel like such a Gen Z kind of like attitude or kind of filtering of like the millennial experience. Am I reading too much into that or what? Because these characters in the movie are like our age, like the Zendaya character, like not the actors obviously, but like they went to like college and like high school at like the same time as me, and I think a little bit older than you.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that like I think one thing that's really fascinating and for me really endearing about the film is that since we can see the reaction to the film, we're seeing, like you said, like there is this sort of millennial mindset to it, even though it's obviously not made by millennial and like, or sorry, not millennial, Gen Z. Like the closest thing that really has to a Gen Z is Zendaya, who admittedly did produce the film as well as star in it. But I think they are responding to it in a way that reflects in like kind of the social media presence. Like it seems like TikTok, Twitter, maybe on Instagram. I can't say for sure. You'd have to do some digging.
There's a specific book that I was thinking of during this movie. I'm glad you mentioned that, called Yellowface by R.F. Kuang.
Oh, I heard that was good.
It's a good book. Yeah. Well, I like R.F. Kuang's previous book, Babel, a lot more. That I think is her current masterpiece. But Yellowface is a very innovative book in the sense that it is, I don't want to say innovative, maybe that's hyperbolic, but the structure and like the writing style of it is, it's really kind of like a social media, like written as a book. And the premise and everything, I won't get into it, but essentially like she is trying to like speak directly to that kind of like communication style through her prose, and that's the thing that's kind of innovative about it. It's like how she filters social media speak through the prose of the novels that you can follow along. And I think that, yeah, it's kind of a kind, with this movie, actually. Like, I think that that's, if anything, maybe a sign of a trend. We're going to probably see more artists, more filmmakers and creatives continue to find ways to do that. Bo Burnham did it with, his thing Inside and all that. Like, we're gonna keep seeing this. I think that like some people will do it well, some people won't, But yeah, I think Challengers is one of those where it's like, yeah, Luca Guadagnino is not exactly, a young hip dude, but obviously like he has the empathy and he has I think the artistic mindset to patiently and objectively observe a generation and create art that matches it. And I think that's a very specific and underrated skill, at least underrated in the sense that it's not talked about, at least from my perspective, like much, right? It's always about like, well, it's only authentic if it's the person of that generation. Like, not always. Throughout history, you've seen plenty of filmmakers and artists and stuff and such, remarking upon things that are completely outside of their generation. But that kind of speaks to the magic of what they're able to do, because sometimes you do get something very unique from that more neutral perspective.
Right on, right on. Is it time to do the Rotten Tomatoes game?
I got one more. One more.
Cool. I want to keep.
I know.
I'll keep talking about Challenger. I didn't know if that's what you were leading up to, though.
Technically, I have a couple more. Iana said, it's remarkable that Luca Guadagnino finds tennis boring to watch because I have never seen the sport filmed with such energy and reverence. I would watch Battle of the Sexes. But that's also precisely why he's perfect for challengers. Who better than an outsider to see tennis for what it is? It's a conversation. It's about judgment. It's observation. Why am I talking like Tucker Carlson? So many of Luca's films are about looking. No wonder he can infuse so much tension and meaning into the simple act of the crowd tracking the back and forth of a tennis ball. That's like one of my favorite things, by the way, we didn't talk about. Like the way that people are like moving their heads with like, you don't see the tennis, you just see the crowd. That was so fun. I loved that so much. Anyway, back to the comment. Who's watching the players when no one else is?
When you know, when you see the audience moving their heads in unison one way, but Zendaya isn't, and the camera zooming in, it's like, ooh, she's a little bit different, and she's the center focus.
But that's the thing; it's just a
focusing on her.
suggestion. It's a suggestion, right? It's a little bit of like, hey, you're paying attention, aren't you? Keep paying attention. Like, that's all it is. It's not preachy. It's not hitting you over the head with a message. It's just being like, here is a little vein of intrigue. Let's follow it. And that to me is like spot on. But anyway, Iana went on to say, what's even more thrilling is that he, as in Luca Guadagnino, understands tennis beyond what happens in the game. He focuses so intently on the routine, the superstitious ticks that lead into the serve, the parading of bodies and the breaks between sets, and how explosive it is when that calculated composure is broken by a scream, an impulsive expletive, or a racket being smashed to bits on the court. And when the players hone in on that precise power and rhythm and synergy, that makes tennis good tennis. There's even something erotic in that. It's everything I didn't know I wanted in a tennis movie, which, by the way, Will, that brings up a lot of tennis rackets. Maybe that's where the budget went for this movie. So a lot of tennis rackets get smashed to smithereens in this movie, but, you know, what are you going to do?
I mean, this is probably a bit of a reach, but if you forgive me, I felt like that kind of added to this sort of rock and roll mentality to it. Like this idea of, you know, like, you know, when rock was kind of coming into like the fold as like stadium art, you know, we started seeing like, you know, it became a parody over time, but like this idea of like rock stars like defiantly like smashing their, you know, guitars and like defiance and all this stuff and anger and passion. And I like that I don't know, I kind of took it as like almost that sort of rock and roll mentality of them just like smashing these tennis rackets in defiance, but also just because of the passion that they're feeling, the eroticism of it all. Sensuality.
Only one more thing I wanted to mention before we move to the Rotten Tomatoes game. I gotta say, so I remember when Luca, the Pixar movie, came out in 2021, and a lot of people were like, wow, you know, like it's called Luca, and people were comparing it a lot to Call Me By Your Name, you know, this like Italian movie, and it's like these two young boys, but like, you know, obviously it's like the Pixar version of it. It's obviously more wholesome than what we see in Call Me By Your Name.
They befriend a girl of the land. They yeah.
that's why. So on Letterboxd, I devoted my review to, you know, somebody like a reporter going up to Luca Guadagnino and being like, you know, what's your response, Mr. Guadagnino, to these allegations? And essentially basically saying that like Challenger is going to be way more like the movie Luca than Call Me By Your Name. It's like two boys who, you know, two guys who are clearly like they just want to kiss, but you know,
two fellas,
and then you know this girl comes in and ruins boy time.
Tennis ain't ready for them.
Tennessee. Yes, that's right. That's a reference. Joke. Yeah, inside joke. So sorry everyone who doesn't get it. All right, let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. Will Ashton, we have 318 reviews counted. It's a lot of reviews for a tennis movie. I love it. What do you think? What's the critic score? What's your guess?
So I don't know if this is off base or not, but the vibe I'm kind of getting is that I think audiences are responding better to the film than critics. But I was about to say critics dislike the film. Like I imagine this is like a certified fresh, like positive film. But I think it's like in the 80s. Like I imagine, I mean, I'll give my audience guess in a little bit, but I feel like that's like firmly in the 90s. And, you know, it seems like people are like really getting into it. And there's like a lot of word of mouth. And it seems like I think the opening box office wasn't amazing, but I haven't really kept track, but I get the vibe that like people are watching this movie because I've just heard a lot of chatter. Like even among people that don't really watch movies all the time, like our people are talking about it in a way that feels very organic. But in any case, that's all to say. I think the critic score is right now at like 87%. I think that's a guess I gave last time, but I'm going to say 87%.
You are so close, Will. You are one off. So do you think that means it's 86% or 88%?
I'm going to say 86%.
Will Ashton, you're supposed to be optimistic. It's 88%. But hey, look, yes, certified fresh. You were very close. Yeah, 88% from critics. And I think that's pretty much in line with, I think, what my impression was with this movie. I really haven't seen a lot of naysayers Certainly it doesn't work for everybody, but yeah, I think for the most part, people are just digging this, if not because they love it as much as maybe I love it, for example, because they just kind of enjoy a sweaty movie like that is kind of doing something a little different. That's a bit original, and appreciating those merits. But what about the audience score, Josh? And we have 500 plus verified ratings. What do you think?
I think it's, like I said, I think it's really high. I don't know if it's like 98% high, but I think it's pretty close to it. I'm going to say 95%.
Well, Ashton, I don't know what to tell you. I feel bad here. I feel like I'm going to disappoint you a little bit here, but it's 73%.
Oh, really? Okay, so it's
a
lot lower than I thought. That's really surprising.
Yeah, the audience says on Rotten Tomatoes, and this is kind of like an editorial, compiling of what audiences are saying, but based on that, it's a Challenger's charms might be too subtle for some, but if you're looking for a character-driven story about attraction, there's a lot to like here. So I guess the implication is that some people aren't getting it. I think it's made as just being like audiences are dumb, but I don't know if that's it. I don't know.
I mean,
I think it's
I guess, like, look, you can say a lot of things. There are a lot of adjectives that you can use for challengers. On the very bottom
subtle,
list, what I say is subtle.
Well, it's saying the charms are subtle. I don't think it's saying that the themes or like what the movie is. I think what maybe subtle is like, oh, what you're supposed to get out of the movie, which I think is kind of a fair, outlook.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of stuff in this movie that's very subtle.
What I'm saying is like,
themes,
it's not the
plot.
movie that's subtle. I think what's subtle is people are watching it and being like, okay, well, why should I like this? Like the charms of it can include things like, yeah, like I think like the overall takeaway beyond the superficial stuff. I don't know. I want to be fair because I could kind of see somebody watching this and maybe certain aspects of it just don't kind of connect in that specific way.
All right. Well, at least you understand.
All right. Fair enough. All right. What about cinema score, Will Ashton? I feel like the Rotten Tomatoes thing kind of rocked your world a little bit. Is that going to impact your cinema score guess?
So, yeah, I was of the opinion, I was going to guess a flat A, but yeah, that's audience score kind of made me downgrade it a little bit. Like, I think maybe
you're playing a game of tennis. You're trying to adapt your game a little bit. You're trying to change it up, your tactics.
So I'm going to say B+.
Hey, there you go. You got it. B+.
Nice.
And I mean, I'm with you. I think that I would hope that audiences will like this a lot more, but that is clearly not the case. They're liking it. They're just not in love with it. I guess they're kind of like, the Zendaya character in that way.
There was a love intentional pun or an unintentional pun?
Unintentional, but yeah, let's run with it. Why not?
They're not 4D love in the film with the film.
Yeah. Well done. But yeah, we'll finish out with Letterboxd. So on Letterboxd.com, the movie Challengers has 733,000 watches. Quite a bit for a movie at this scale. And Will Ashton, I have to ask you now your prediction for the average rating. What do you think the average rating for this movie is?
Even though I had to downgrade my my cinema score a little bit, I think this is a Letterboxd movie. As like we mentioned, I feel it's resonating with a millennial and a Gen Z crowd. I think it's the type of film that just kind of matches their energy. It kind of captures their attention span, I think, for the heart of it in a way that I can't say a lot of 130-minute films maybe do for a younger generation, though I don't want to presume or be ageist or anything. But in any case, I think this film is probably higher than the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So I'm going to say 3.8.
It's even higher. It's actually a 4.1. So nice, I think your overall, your overall kind of take, it was right there. Like Letterboxd is eating this movie up. If this movie was popcorn, they'd be asking for a refill. Yeah, this thing has 314,000 likes.
They're like, give me more popcorn, give me even more butter.
Yeah, they're looking at that popcorn bucket like people look at the Dune popcorn bucket, or that they look like at a peach in maybe Call Me by Your Name. Sure, but yeah, so it has 12,000 fans. That's like exponentially more than we usually like when we usually do this. Like we maybe see like 30 fans, maybe 100. It's kind of pushing it. 12,000 is like way more than usual for a movie that just came out. But hey, look, it has also been about a month since this came out. So
that's probably a bigger thing. But
yeah, maybe.
But no, I mean, I think that's very telling because I think generally speaking, I feel like the Letterboxd score might start off high, but like with as more people watch a film or it becomes it gains a wider audience, that Letterboxd score tempers a little bit.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's that high and it's probably stayed that high like a month away, I think is a credit to the film and the response it's getting on Letterboxd.
Yeah, I think we can finally agree there. All right, so Will, the next big movie coming out is going to be Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. So that's going to be dropping on May 24th. The Garfield dropping over Memorial Day weekend, yes.
Sure.
So we got some big stuff coming. You know, there's some smaller things. Now, the movie If did come out this past weekend. We chose not to talk about If.
Sure.
The reviews I think we were smart on that one. The reviews have not been good.
I would have happily seen it if you had seen it, but
I'm not
going to go out of my way to see it if I'm not reviewing it.
The only other movie that I was definitely curious about, because I don't want to see Back to Black. I think that looks pretty bad, and I think that you didn't like it. And even I know you saw it and you weren't a fan. I do really want to see Babes at some point. I don't know when I'm going to see it, but is that one on your radar at all?
Yeah, no, I actually, one of the people I saw Garfield with, we were talking about making plans to see Babes.
Nice.
I'm a big
it's
fan.
It's a limited release right now, so some folks, some listeners have a chance to see it at this point.
I believe it's playing near me right now. I could be wrong, but I thought I saw it listed in the showtimes for this week. But if not, it's definitely coming in the week ahead. But in any case, yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Pamela Adlon from her various years of acting, and I really like her show Better Things. Yeah. I still need to finish the last few episodes, but I think it's really sophisticated, smart, raw, vulnerable show, and I hope she brings that sensibilities to her first feature. I'm a little tired, I think, at this point of Ilana Glazer, but I think it's really fascinating that she's made 2 films about pregnancy as a star, writer, and producer.
The last one was False Positive, right? The gaslighting movie.
Yeah, which is a full-on like horror movie, not like dark comedy. Really, it's like a horror movie, and this is just like a Judd Apatow like comedy. So I think it's funny that she did that, but yeah, I don't know what that says.
Agreed. No, I totally agree. Yeah. So other than that, I know The Fall. If we were looking at other movies that we haven't talked about yet that have come out, The Fall Guy is another one that's on my radar. I'd like to see it at some point. I'm not sure if we'll make room for a Cinemaholics review, but I do plan to see it. There's also, I saw The TV Glow, which I've seen a lot of chatter about. It's a new A24 movie. You know, I'm a sucker for an A24 horror. I think, though, that movie, similar to Civil War, I'm probably not going to see it in theaters, probably going to see it at home. But I'm excited to see both of those movies at some point. I am very much behind. But it sounds like Furiosa, Garfield. Like we got stuff coming up. We have Hitman. Hitting Netflix. I think it's unlimited at the moment, but it's going to be on Netflix in a couple weeks.
I think it hits limited next week or on Memorial Day weekend. Then it goes to
I think
Netflix
you're right.
The
yes.
week after.
Then it's you're right. So it'll be on Netflix on June 7th, and then Well, I did see Anyone But You, the last Glenn Powell joint.
Oh yeah, that's right.
With Sydney Sweeney. It was just as bad / watchable as I thought it would be. I love bad watchable movies.
I've heard very polarized sort of things about that film so far.
It's something. It's something.
Sure.
It's one of those movies. It's like, it reminds me of like when, you know, there's like a kid in your family. Well, you have 2 nephews now. You'll notice this when like a young child will come up to you and they think that they've become smart. And they try to tell you that like they did something smart, and you're like, oh, okay. I love you. I just want the best for you. And, you know, you don't want to bust their chops. And that's how I was with Anyone But You. I was just like, okay, have some fun. Here's an Otter Pop.
The only other movie that comes to mind that I feel is worth noting is, I believe, Evil Does Not Exist, the new Hamaguchi film from the director of Drive My Car. He's in limited release right now. I really want to watch that as well. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's gotten the exact same response as Drive My Car, but it's definitely being well reviewed, and it seems like one that's very much worth watching.
Hey, look, Drive My Car is one of those movies that like gives that director a pass, you know, like no matter what, I'm always going to be in line for anything he's worked on. Pool Man, I'm going to be skipping that Chris Pine movie. It looks god awful, even though the poster kind of kicks. The poster looks way better than the movie itself.
But honestly, I kind of want to watch it, but I want to watch like on Netflix. Like, I don't know if I want to go to theaters to see it. I want to watch Unfrosted, even though I heard it's terrible. I'm just very curious about that film.
Hey,
I
it's
know
on
you're
Netflix.
not.
Easy to watch. I did almost click it, but I ended up watching Anyone But You instead. That's how that happened. I saw a new indie movie that I didn't technically premiere in San Francisco, but it showed up or it screened at our CamFest, which is kind of like an Asian film festival in San Francisco. But these two guys, I actually know them in real life, made this movie called Extremely Unique Dynamic. It's like an Asian stoner movie. But I know these guys because I literally met them at a concert like earlier this year. And like by a matter of like, we were on the same kind of like bus basically. And we kind of hit it off and, we've been chatting and stuff. They're super cool guys, Harrison and Ivan, and they made this like really fun indie movie called Extremely Unique Dynamic. I've watched it twice. I'm going to be interviewing them and stuff. And yeah, I think that's going to be hitting theatrical this coming summer because they just got distribution. So definitely we'll keep you all posted on that. I'm obviously going to be biased and, because it's people I know. But yeah, that'll be a fun one, especially for folks who enjoy more kind of like indie stoner movies.
Sure. What was that called again?
It's called Extremely Unique Dynamic. Yeah.
Extremely unique and incredibly dynamic.
There you go. There's one guy in it. I don't know if you ever saw Fresh Off the Boat, but there's the main kid from Fresh Off the Boat is in the movie. But anyway, the only other thing I was going to mention, I don't know, we're kind of going long, but we do have a lot to catch up on. Tarot, I just saw the reviews have been coming out and they've been a lot worse than I expected.
Oh,
so I'm probably going to skip it.
Yeah. I forgot that was even a thing.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping it might be like, maybe like in the 20s and 30s on Rotten Tomatoes, be like, oh, because like tarot cards, I think that could be fun. But it's like a 19%. So I'm a little bit like, maybe not.
Oh, I like that you're like, oh, maybe you'll get like a agreeable 20%.
20%. Sorry, I think I was thinking more like 30. Are you gonna watch The Last Stop in Yuma County, by the way?
That's a Jim Cummings starring film, right? He didn't direct that one, but he's in it.
Correct, which is definitely unusual. The director is Francis Galuppi. But that one I kind of want to see. The reviews have been coming out, and it's looking good.
I don't know much. Is it like another sort of like Tarantino-esque, like Bad Times at El Royale on a smaller scale kind of thing?
I'm not sure because I haven't seen the trailer. I've only kind of seen the synopsis, and it could be, it definitely, it looks more like, like that Americana kind of, if anything, maybe more Coen Brothers, but I could be way off. I don't
know. It just had like a One Night McCool kind of vibe. I don't even know if you remember that film, but like that kind of vibe, like not like in tone, just like of a piece with those kind of Tarantino knockoffs. But I have no idea. I haven't watched the trailer or anything. I could be speaking totally out of turn. So yeah.
I'm so sorry. I totally skipped The Strangers Chapter 1.
Oh, I heard that was bad.
Oh man, yeah. It's apparently a big train wreck. And a bunch of us saw it coming because there were basically no press for it. I mean, they basically were like, yeah, we're just going to like pump this out. We don't really care. That's kind of the
you say that, but like Rennie Harlan is like, I made a 4-hour version of this.
Oh my gosh, that's insane.
Or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I can't quite, If anything, I think TV is going to be very exciting this coming month. I think June's coming up. There's a lot of big shows. So I have to end this show, Cinemaholics, real quick with a question, Lashin. Is this the moment when you're going to finally watch The Bear? Yes?
Well, you were teeing me to watch it in Palm Springs, and you never.
But then we ended up having deep conversations and going to Disneyland instead. Yeah, that was my fault.
But no, I mean, I definitely think I'm gonna get around to it soon. There are a couple other things I want to like. There are a ton of shows I haven't finished, and also I really want to watch The Curse. I feel like that one I might prioritize before The Bear because it's a shorter commitment, but. Like that, I really want to watch. I've been hearing so much about Smiling Friends, the Michael Cusack show, and I know that just came back. I want to finally watch that. And there's like so many TV things I want to watch right now.
Hey, look, no judgment. I just want what's best for you, and I just happen to believe that what's best for you is The Bear. But all right, thanks so much for listening to Cinema.
That Movie Pass documentary. I think that's on like Max now or something.
Oh, I haven't heard about this one. You're gonna have to message me on the slide because I'm immediately interested. But anyway, that'll do it for this week's episode of Cinemaholics. Thanks so much for listening. And if you do manage to check out Challengers, we hope that you like it as much as we do. If you don't, let us know why. And yeah, from the Internet California, I'm John Negron.
And from the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton. That's me hitting a tennis ball, you see. That's me doing the audio for when you like you hit the tennis ball, you know what I mean?
Serve
I don't
you
care
next
if you keep
time.
this going. Yeah, you can keep going. I don't
You stepped
care if
over
you
my
don't
serve you next time. That was a fun.
Okay, say it again. Yeah.
Okay. See you next time. Yeah, the moment passed. Oh well.